Have you ever stopped mid-bite during a late evening meal and wondered, why do we even call it supper? It's a word that feels warm, almost nostalgic. It conjures images of dim lighting, quiet conversations, maybe even a family gathered around a table after a long day. But unlike breakfast or lunch, the word supper carries a kind of mystery. It sounds older, softer, and somehow more intimate. So where did it come from? Why do some people use it while others say dinner? And how did this simple word come to mean so many different things across time and cultures? The answer takes us on a fascinating journey through language, history, and the way humans have always organized their lives around food. Let's explore right here on History of Simple Things. The word supper traces its origins back to the Old French word souper, which itself came from the verb souper, meaning to eat the evening meal. This term made its way into English around the 13th century, during a time when French heavily influenced the English language after the Norman conquest. But if we go even further back, the roots may lie in the Proto-Germanic word supan, which means to sip or to drink. This connection is incredibly revealing because it hints at what supper originally was. Not a heavy feast, but a lighter, simpler meal, often consisting of soup or broth that could be sipped rather than chewed. In fact, the very idea of sipping food paints a picture of a humble, modest end to the day rather than a grand culinary event. In medieval Europe, daily eating patterns were very different from what we're used to today. The main meal of the day was often eaten earlier, sometimes around midday, and it was called dinner. This was the largest and most important meal, especially for laborers who needed energy during daylight hours. Supper, on the other hand, was a smaller, lighter meal eaten in the evening, often after sunset. It was meant to be easy on the stomach and quick to prepare, especially since artificial lighting was limited and people tended to wind down once darkness fell. This distinction between dinner and supper was very clear at the time, and it reflects how closely meal names were tied to daily routines and the natural rhythm of daylight. As time passed, however, the meanings of these words began to shift. With the Industrial Revolution came major changes in work schedules, urban living, and social habits. People no longer worked strictly according to daylight, and meal times became more flexible. In many places, especially in cities, the main meal of the day moved to the evening after work hours. This evening meal started to be called dinner, pushing supper into a different role, or in some cases out of use entirely. But in rural areas and certain cultures, the traditional meaning stuck. Their dinner might still refer to the midday meal, while supper remained the evening meal. This is why even today the word supper can mean different things depending on where you are and how you were raised. Interestingly, the word supper also carries a certain emotional and cultural weight that dinner sometimes lacks. Dinner can feel formal, structured, even a bit rigid. Think of dinner parties, reservations, and multi-course meals. Supper, by contrast, feels casual and comforting. It's the meal you have at home, perhaps in your pajamas, maybe even on the couch. It suggests warmth, simplicity, and familiarity. In some families, especially in regions like the southern United States or parts of the United Kingdom, supper is still the preferred term for the evening meal, and it often implies a sense of tradition and togetherness that goes beyond just eating. Religion has also played a role in shaping the word's significance. One of the most well-known uses of the term is in the Last Supper, the final meal that Jesus shared with his disciples before his crucifixion. This event has been depicted in countless works of art and holds deep spiritual meaning for millions of people. The use of the word supper here reinforces its historical association with an evening meal and adds a layer of solemnity and importance to the term. It's not just a meal, it's a moment of connection, reflection, and meaning. Today, the word supper exists alongside dinner and even tea in some cultures, each carrying its own nuances. In modern usage, supper is often less about strict timing and more about tone. It suggests something informal, perhaps smaller and often more personal. You might have supper after a long day when you don't want anything too heavy or when you're sharing a quiet meal with family. In contrast, dinner might be used for larger gatherings or more formal occasions. But these distinctions are far from universal. And that's part of what makes the word so interesting. It adapts to the people who use it. So, why is it called supper? At its core, the name reflects a long history of human habits, linguistic evolution, and cultural change. It comes from a time when evenings were quieter, meals were simpler, and the act of eating was closely tied to the natural flow of the day. The word itself carries echoes of sipping warm soup by candlelight, of winding down after work, and of sharing a modest meal with those closest to you. Even as our lives have become faster and more complex, supper remains a reminder of something slower, softer, and deeply human. The next time you hear someone say they're having supper, take a moment to appreciate the story behind that word. It's more than just a label for a meal. It's a small piece of history, a cultural snapshot, and a reflection of how we've always gathered around food to end our days. And in a world that rarely slows down, maybe there's something comforting about that. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.